If the New York Mets are going to win the World Series this year, they need to get a true Robin to Edwin Diaz's Batman at the back end of their bullpen.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Over the last couple of days, I have been talking about the trade deadline for the New York Mets. I broke down some bats that could be on the move. Then I talked about some starting pitchers who could be traded that would interest the Mets. Now I want to focus on a part of this team that I think has to be addressed above all else. I think the Mets, under certain circumstances, might not have to shoot for the moon on the bat that they acquire. They might not need to get that ace at the deadline. But I think more than anything else, they have to get an elite option at the back end of that bullpen. And sure, it might be someone that I'm not even thinking about. But the way I wanted to do this is I wanted to talk about closers who could get moved. Guys that you could trade for and say, you know what, if Edwin Diaz is not available, you have someone just as good that can close out a game. If you think about the best teams, they don't get cheap at the deadline when it comes to the reliever they acquire. They go for the moon. Last year, the Padres were the team that was best suited to take down the Dodgers in the playoffs. They went out and they got Tanner Scott. Think about the Mets in 2015. Yes, Yoenis Cespedes was everything to that team, the biggest acquisition the Mets made. But if they didn't go out and get Tyler Clippard and Addison Reed, they would not have had the run that they did. But those moves were critical, and it allowed the Mets to get to the World Series, and they should have won it. But that's what the Mets have to do. They have to look for the top possible arms. So what I wanted to look at is closers who could be moved. So I actually did an article for Just Baseball where I broke down all the different closers that are on the block to get traded. And the way we're going to break it down for the show today, first segment, closers on the bubble to be moved. Second segment, closers who will be shopped. And then the final segment, one guy you just got to ask about. But as we get into it, we'll save the pie in the sky for the end. I want to talk about closers that are on teams that may or may not sell. And you'll be surprised with some of these when I say they might not sell. And that's where we'll start with the Cardinals. I don't know if Ryan Helsley will be moved. Now, Ryan Helsley went into this season as a clear-cut trade candidate. Nobody expected the Cardinals to be anywhere close to the race, and so they would let it play out, let him build up his value, and then deal him. Ryan Helsley last year led Major League Baseball with 49 saves, pitched to a 2.04 ERA. This year, not quite as good, 3.19 ERA, but he's still a reliable closer. He still throws absolute gas. He still makes a ton of sense to be the eighth inning guy to Edwin Diaz. But the Cardinals, I don't know if they're going to move. I was listening to Nothing Personal with David Sampson, who's the former president of the Marlins, a podcast, and he was talking about the fact that he had just recently seen Bill DeWitt, the owner of the Cardinals, and how fired up he was that the Cardinals are winning games. They're in this weird in-between where Chaim Bloom is going to take over, but it's the last year for John Mozeliak to run the team. Is he really going to be thinking, sell, set up Chaim? Or is he going to look at the team and say, you know what? Let's go for it. We're close enough. When you see the Brewers surging in the NL Central along with the Cubs, I think it makes sense for the Cardinals to sell, and this is the piece to sell. So it's definitely worth mentioning. I think he would be an amazing fit. For whatever reason, though, I'm just not entirely sure he's going to get moved. Now, another guy that fits that billing of I'm not sure if he's going to get moved because the team wants to contend is Aroldis Chapman and the Boston Red Sox. They are surging in the standings lately. They've been playing really good baseball. And Aroldis Chapman is their closer, and he has been lights out this year, a 1.22 ERA, 16 saves. He's been outstanding, 55 strikeouts and 37 innings pitched. He's still throwing absolute fuel out there. He'd be great. And he has been traded twice to teams that went on to win the World Series. The Yankees traded him to the Cubs in 2016. They won the World Series, also the same year that Andrew Miller was traded. We're talking about that a little bit tomorrow as I get into some mock trades. That'll be exciting about possibilities for the Mets deadline. But when you look at Chapman, he was traded then. He was traded in 2023 both times. He was really solid. And I try to poke holes in him as a fit. And in my memory, Aroldis Chapman hasn't been great in the playoffs. Look at what he's actually done, though. ERA is 2.37 in October. So just from a pure baseball fit, it makes sense. Personally, I don't want to see Aroldis Chapman on the Mets. I just don't like him for obvious reasons. I prefer they get somebody else. But you can't talk about this deadline and talk about top relievers and not mention him without, it'd be a complete oversight to not even utter his name. So that's another one that definitely could be moved. Now, here's one that I'm very curious about. Felix Bautista. He's coming off Tommy John surgery, and he's had a great season. He has not missed a beat. It's a lot easier for closers to come off TJ and not have the same rust that is associated with a guy like Sandy Alcantara right now that's really struggled coming off TJ. He's got a 2.41 ERA. He's nailed down 18 saves. We just watched him in that series. Well, I'm recording this in the middle of the final week of the first half, but Mets just played the Orioles. We saw him pitch. He's a stud, and he's massive. He's, how tall is this guy? 6'8", and you'd have him under control for 2 more years beyond this season. So it would cost a pretty penny to get him, but the Orioles are surging, and they have a new owner. I don't know if they're going to sell the way we all think that they are. It makes sense for them to, but they might not, particularly a guy that they have control over cheap for the next 2 years beyond this season. I think it's more likely that they flip the Reynolds in some trades where they might get pieces back that are close enough to the big leagues that they can still try to contend. So I just don't know if the Orioles are going to move Bautista. And then the last guy, which is in the part of the show of closers on the bubble to be moved, who also might not even fit the Mets. I think for all 4 of these guys, you could say that Helsley obviously fits them the most. Bautista would if he got traded. Carlos Estevez is a name that has to be mentioned because the Royals are in the fringes of this wild card race right now. We'll see what happens with them. They signed him in the offseason, 2-year, $22.2 million deal. They really could flip him if they wanted to. There's also a club option for $13 million in 2027. He has solidified the back end of their bullpen. It's been a real problem for them. I don't know if they really will move him, but through his first 30 appearances this year, he did have a 2.05 ERA. That was before he gave up that big hit to Mark Vientos last night as I'm recording this on Saturday morning. But regardless, Estevez is a good pitcher. The fact that he gave up the home run or the grand slam to Lindor last year, I don't know if it makes the most sense to trade for him. But again, a closer who absolutely could be moved. Next up, I want to talk about closers who will be shopped. Not necessarily moved, but will definitely be shopped because these teams are out of the race right now. We're going to go through some more options in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you're going to find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 14,000 subscribers. I really hope that we can get there while I'm out of town this week and doing all these pre-recorded shows. I appreciate all of you who are hitting that subscribe button to stay up to date with all of your latest Locked On Mets content with the trade deadline fast approaching. Let's talk about closers who will be shopped. We'll start with the guy that I think is the lowest impact arm that we'll discuss today, but someone that just continues to put up good season after good season after good season, even if his stuff might not be quite up there with some of the other arms we're discussing on this show. But Kyle Finnegan has just been consistent. Every single year, he's closing games for the Nationals, doing his thing. Last year, he saved 38 games, had a 3.68 ERA. They didn't move him at the deadline in an all-star season. I don't know why, but they kept him, let him hit free agency, and then they ended up bringing him back. Or maybe they non-tendered him. I think they actually had a year of control, and I think they non-tendered him and then signed him back. So interesting fit for sure. This year, 2.36 ERA upon recording right now in 34 and a third innings pitched. 27 strikeouts. You don't get that elite swing and miss stuff, but throws the ball hard, gets the job done. He makes sense for sure, but I want a little more impact. So then we get to some big names. Emmanuel Clase. The Guardians are falling out of this race, and Emmanuel Clase is a top-tier closer. Last year, he was the best in baseball. He's making $4.9 million this season, $6.4 million next season, then 2 club options that are relatively affordable for a closer, $10 million apiece in 27 and 28. That means there is no rush to trade Clase. They do not have to deal him, but considering the fact that there's been a little bit of regression, he did not have the best playoff run, and it's had a mixed season this year. He's still done a great job. His ERA is still in the low threes last I checked. Yeah, 3.05. He saved 20 games. He's still a great option, but I think that the Guardians will definitely shop him. Whether they'll move him or not depends on the packages they get offered. I'm in on Clase, but there's a couple of other guys who are throwing the ball a little bit better right now that make a little bit more sense to me just because I think it's going to cost more for Clase than it might for a couple of these other guys. And I don't know if he's worth that extra cost and prospect return. So then we get to, I think, my favorite, maybe on this entire show, certainly my favorite of this section before we get to the you got to ask. And that is David Bednar. David Bednar will be moved. It would be very surprising if he's not. Year and a half left of control. He's in his final 2 seasons of arbitration. So 1 more year left after this season. He's also pitching extraordinarily well right now. Last year was a brutal year for Bednar, 5.77 ERA. This year started as more of the same. He gets demoted down to the minor leagues and ends up getting recalled a little bit later. He was demoted on April 1st, comes back on April 19th. Across his last 25 appearances at the time that I wrote this article, he had pitched to a 2.35 ERA, and he was striking out 36.7% of the batters that he has faced. That is elite. Also, you talk about Sierra, which is a stat that basically is a really advanced metrics type stat that tells you, independent of fielding, independent of everything else, what should a pitcher's ERA be, right? That's generally what it is. His Sierra is 1.75 this season. That's the 4th best mark in all of baseball. This was, again, about a week ago, or I should listen to this maybe 2 weeks ago when I wrote this, but it still holds true. He's still pitching this well. The only guys who have been better based on Sierra is Griffin Jax, Edwin Diaz, and Josh Hader. So he really is as good as anybody in baseball right now. You plug David Bednar in, it gives you a closer option that counters Edwin Diaz. So if Edwin Diaz isn't available, Bednar can certainly get the job done, or you can stick him into the 7th, the 8th inning. It's, to me, the most ideal fit for the Mets because it's, again, a year and a half of control. So you shouldn't have to give an arm and a leg to get it done. You can make a pretty reasonable trade to get Bednar, and he gives you so much impact. I also think it's worth mentioning Edwin Diaz has an opt-out in his contract after this season. Now, to me, if you're thinking about the Mets and where this is hopefully trending with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor and Steve Cohen wanting to win a World Series, and this being a win-now time of baseball, time that could be sort of the golden age of Mets baseball where they hopefully have all this success. Edwin Diaz is a legacy closer. There is something more valuable about having a guy that's been in your uniform for a long time that can still do the job, that can be pitching in all the big games where there's that extra emotional tie for a fan if Edwin Diaz is getting the final 3 outs of a World Series. Not that emotional tie is everything, but it makes sense to keep Diaz beyond this season. If he opts out of that contract, you're going to have to come to terms on a new one. Having one of these guys that you pick up that has control beyond next season gives you more leverage in those talks. It gives you more leverage to get the right deal for Edwin Diaz. And if Edwin gets a better deal somewhere else and he decides to walk, well, you have a David Bednar for next season. So I think that's an important thing about getting one of these closers with control is it gives you a hedge on whatever Edwin Diaz decides to do if and when he hits the market. It would make sense for Edwin Diaz to want to test free agency after the season that he's having. So it's just worth mentioning that getting a guy that's not a rental does make a lot of sense for the Mets, especially with what you might have to give up to get an arm with this much impact. So David Bednar, to me right now, is my favorite option, but there's one guy that I would want above Bednar, a guy that has elite stuff that comes with an extra year of control, who would absolutely be lights out and give you just an incredible 1-2 punch at the back end of that bullpen. We're going to talk about this last closer here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I was using Monarch, I was shocked at how much money I was wasting on subscriptions that I wasn't using. And also, you start to realize when you get this, look at your finances, how much that takeout starts to add up over time. I realized that using Monarch. Take control of your finances. With Monarch Money, use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so the last guy that I want to talk about today, which is the you gotta ask reliever, Jhoan Duran. If you can get Duran from the Twins, that is the type of all-in move that makes you a legit World Series contender. If you can close out games with Duran and Diaz, good luck. Good luck. Duran, for those of you who aren't aware, he is a 27-year-old flamethrower for the Twins. He has a career 2.38 ERA. This season, he is pitching to a sparkling 1.49 ERA across his first 43 games and 42 1/3 innings pitched with 15 saves. He has 47 strikeouts in those 42 1/3 innings pitched, 16 walks. That's it. He's just such a good pitcher. This is the type of guy you just go get. You get him, and yes, it's going to cost a lot. You could mitigate that a little bit with getting the bat in this trade too. I talked about Willie Castro on Monday's episode. I'm going to do some mock trades tomorrow on the prospect episode where I talk about what the Mets should potentially put on the table at the deadline, which pieces are going to move the needle that the Mets can afford to trade, and then which guys they should absolutely stay away from. I think you can make a trade for Duran where you just get Willie Castro thrown in, and then all you have to do on top of that is go out and get a starting pitcher maybe. So I will give you a mock for this tomorrow, but to just really fully illustrate how good this guy is, nobody throws harder in baseball than Duran. His average fastball velocity is just over 100 miles per hour. He's in the 100th percentile if you look at his baseball savant. He also keeps the ball on the ground at an unbelievable rate. 69.7% of the time this year, the ball's on the ground. Why? Because he's got the best split finger, I almost said in baseball, with all due respect to Kodai Senga. But when you're talking about relievers and this guy throws a splitter at 98 miles per hour, let me say that again, a 98 mile per hour splitter. It is disgusting. That's all he needs is 2 pitches, but he has 3. He also has a knuckle curve that's getting whiffs 43% of the time. Duran would be the perfect fit for the New York Mets. There's, to me, not even a close second. Granted, Bednar has been great this year, so maybe I shouldn't say there's no close second. But if you're talking about impact, Duran's the guy to get. And with that extra control, with the 2 years beyond this season, you are sitting in the absolute driver's seat in an Edwin Diaz contract negotiation. Edwin Diaz wants to be a Met for the rest of his career. I can guarantee you that. The Mets probably want to see Edwin Diaz stick around for that long. Well, you add Duran, I think you're actually moving closer to making that happen because it just sets everybody's mindset in a realistic place where Edwin's got to know, if I just search for the most possible money, the Mets have a guy that can take the job and can run with it. And heck, he's even a guy the Mets could extend if they wanted to with the 2 years of control. I think instead, though, you work out a new deal with Diaz, maybe a lot of deferred money, so he takes one for the team. I can really see this making a lot of sense where having a top-end closer on the roster allows you to get the deal you want to for Edwin Diaz. And then Duran, he's making a little over $4 million, 2 more years of arbitration left. He might broach past $10 million in that final year of ARB, but he's going to be worth it. This is the guy that just would be so awesome to get. And again, if you got Willie Castro in the deal as well, that gives you a high floor utility guy that could play second, could play third, could play the corner spots in the outfield, a guy that's getting on base at a 360 clip from both spots. He's a switch hitter. So left-handed, you're going to see more of a patient approach, more, draws, walks, get on. From the right side, a little more power to his game. He's going to swing it a little bit more, but either way, it's a quality big league at bat. You can pull off a trade where you get those two guys in one deal. I think that's a home run for the Mets. I really do. But when it comes to the closer market, to reiterate it all and go through it, Ryan Helsley on the rental side is the ideal option if he is moved. When you are looking at guys who, are going to cost a lot when it comes to prospect return because they're closers with multiple years of control, the names that jump out the most to me, it's Felix Bautista if the Orioles decide to move him. It's David Bednar from the Pirates, who I think is the easiest to acquire when it comes to prospect return, but still gives you the impact that you want. And then the dream is Jhoan Duran. You get Duran, and I feel like this team can absolutely win a World Series because you just have two guys that are so good at the back of that bullpen. But let me know what you think. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Which of these relievers to you makes the most sense? I'll also say, actually, I should note, Jake Bird probably gets moved from the Rockies. His numbers are starting to slip a little bit. I'd love it if Brian Abreu was moved, but the Astros certainly are not going to be trading anyone at this year's deadline. Theoretically, I think now one of the guys that I didn't mention that is worth mentioning because this team is sort of falling off a little bit lately is the Mariners, and Andres Munoz has been ridiculous this year. He could be a nice fit. He's under a pretty good contract as well. You'd be trading for another Mariners reliever. So you'd have Edwin Diaz, the trade from 2019, and you'd have Andres Munoz, their current closer. He's got a great contract. Wow, looking at it now. You got 3 club options, a $6 million, an $8 million, and a $10 million beyond this season. So definitely an affordable closer who has just been so good this year. He's got a 1.54 ERA this season with 21 saves. You can make a case he's been the best reliever in baseball, although that conversation still includes Edwin Diaz. Also, Josh Hader's in the mix, Brian Abreu. There's been a lot of guys that have been really good. Heck, you can call Aroldis Chapman one of the best this year, but Munoz has been very solid. I don't know if the Mariners really will move him because they're still in a clear window to win. But if they keep falling out of it, never say never. So that's just a couple of other names in the market. We know how David Stearns operates. There's every chance that it's going to be relievers that we aren't even considering right now. Is going to go completely out in left field. I did not have Ryan Stanek, Phil Maton, Huascar Braziban. None of those guys were at the top of my mind last year. And boom, he made some trades that ended up working out for the Mets. I want to see some more impact this year. But regardless, I trust David Stearns to find some options. And ultimately, I do believe that the left-handed bullpen arm that's going to help the back end for the Mets is on the roster already with Brooks Raley. I really think Raley's going to be awesome down the stretch. He's been great on his rehab. He was great the last couple of years. He's just a veteran that knows how to pitch, and it seems like he's now even better than he was in the past because he's got a couple more ticks of velo after getting that Tommy John surgery. So I think Raley does count as one of the additions. That's why you might have been surprised where I was just talking about picking up one reliever. I don't know if the Mets have to go out and get multiple. I mean, they can, but they have a lot of depth still because you're going to have Budo, Kranick, all these guys. Raley obviously should be able to come back in the second half. But when it comes to trust in that bullpen, I think you have to get one really great arm, and then you sort of roll from there. I don't think you have to do much more beyond that because all of that is not even mentioning an Alex Carrillo who just came up, Ryan Lambert, Anthony Nunez also is doing a lot of really good things in the minor leagues. Dylan Ross is, I believe, another top pitching prospect that throws really hard that could certainly come up and make an impact. You always could shorten up a Nolan McLean or a Brandon Sproat, have one of those guys pitch out of the bullpen. I think there's enough internal options that this really can just be one trade. If there's one trade to make, it's, to me, Duran or Bednar are the guys that stand out the absolute most. On tomorrow's show, though, I'm going to break down which prospects should be put on the table this year, and I'm going to give you a couple mock trades that will include these top-end arms. It'll also be an inclusion of some of the other guys we talked about earlier this week, so it's kind of a culmination of these three shows that I started the week with: the bat episode, the starting pitching episode, and then now this closer episode. And we'll try to script what would be a very great deadline for the New York Mets that makes them a World Series contender. So do not miss out on that show. It'll be a lot of good prospect talk, as well as some mock trades that we all love this time of year. I hope you all enjoy that show, enjoyed this one, and are subscribed if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio side, you follow, you rate, you review, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today has our local experts for each team, league-wide experts for each league, keeping you covered on all of the latest in the world of sports. Check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.